Hey guys, welcome back to r/entitled parents. In this story, my crazy family demanded that I give my son to my sister because she is infertile and deserves a kid. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled The New Accountant's Blunder. This happened a couple of years ago at the printing company where I worked. My role was in graphic design and I was on the team that handled emergency requests and last-minute jobs that came in after regular business hours. We were salaried employees, but our on-call rotation had us scheduled for 1 week per month, where we received an extra $250 monthly stipend. Whenever we got called in, we would clock our hours and get paid time and a half based on our regular rates. This system had been running smoothly for ages, and well, one day we had a new accountant join the team. Let's call him Mr. Tightwad. Fresh out of college and full of ambition, he made it clear from the get-go that his main focus was cutting costs. During his long-winded introductory speech, he repeated words like expenditure, streamlining and efficiency so many times that we knew he would be a thorn in our side. True to our predictions, within a fortnight, Mr. Tightwad implemented stricter expense approval policies. He would question routine expenses like fuel costs or why we filled up at a particular gas station, and it did not take long before he demanded that we leave the company vans at the office instead of taking them home after our shifts. We tried explaining the practicality of having the vans at our homes for emergency callouts, but Mr. Tightwad just could not wrap his head around the logistics of our job. His textbooks had not prepared him for the realities of the printing business. However, Mr. Tightwad's most brilliant, or rather disastrous idea was messing with our on-call pay structure. The system had been in place since the late 80s, but he decided to optimize it by cutting out the 1-hour overlap we had during shift handovers. This hour was crucial. It allowed the outgoing team member to refuel, restock and clean the van while the incoming person inspected the inventory and ensured everything was in order. When we heard about this change, we voiced our concerns, but the senior accountant, who had recommended Mr. Tightwad, backed his decision, insisting that we should be able to prepare the vans during regular work hours. "You guys can just pick up the van from the office whenever you're on call," Mr. Tightwad declared confidently. "You have the gate code, so it shouldn't be a problem." Little did he know, he had just opened a can of worms. The following weeks were abnormally busy with emergency callouts. Instead of having a van ready at our homes, we now had to commute to the office, pick up a van, drive to the job site, return the van, and then drive back home. The process added anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour and a half to our response times, severely inconveniencing our clients. However, there was a silver lining for us. Since we were now driving our personal vehicles to and from the office outside of regular work hours, the company had to reimburse us for mileage at the standard rate of $0.45 per mile. If we could not drive for any reason, they even had to cover the cost of a taxi. Suddenly, Mr. Tightwad's cost-saving measure was backfiring spectacularly. The extra mileage reimbursements, combined with the increased on-call pay for the additional hours we worked, ended up costing the company significantly more than before. "Hey Jenkins," I overheard one of my colleagues say during a break, "did you see the look on Mr. Tightwad's face when I clocked out after the triple call-out last night? I made more in 1 week than I usually do in a month." We all had a good laugh at Mr. Tightwad's expense, reveling in the unintended consequences of his ill-conceived policy change. It did not take long for disgruntled clients to start complaining about the delayed response times. One even witnessed an employee drive past their facility in a personal vehicle only to return 40 minutes later with a company van. When word of these complaints reached our director, she immediately reversed Mr. Tightwad's decision, allowing us to take the vans home again and reinstating the old on-call handover system. But we were not having it. Some of us had already purchased larger vehicles, claiming we would not accommodate the company vans anymore, though I suspect this was just an excuse. We insisted on sticking to the new routine, much to Mr. Tightwad's frustration. For the remainder of my time at the company, we continued leaving the vans at the office, driving our personal cars to pick them up for callouts and then returning them afterwards. It was a bit of a hassle, but the extra pay made it worthwhile. As for Mr. Tightwad, he disappeared from the corporate directory a few months later, presumably shown the door for his costly blunder. The senior accountant who had backed him was demoted to a more junior role, no longer having any say in our operations. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post some star emojis in the comments if you wanna support me. Thank you so much, and the next one is the title story. It is titled, "My entitled family demands I give my son to my sister because she is infertile and deserves a kid." Growing up in my house was like a tightrope act. I'm the youngest of 2 daughters, but you would never know it. When I was very young, my sister Lydia was my entire universe. I looked up to her fiercely, but Lydia had demons, from anxiety to falling in with the young friends. Once my sister hit high school, she always seemed to be in some kind of mess. Due to Lydia's issues, my parents loved us both, but they always expected more from me. I always had to be the mature sister, even though I was 2 years younger. While Lydia was serving detention, my parents were pushing me through AP classes and SAT prep. It was as if all the pressure my parents wanted to put on both children was directed solely at me. I never let my parents get in the way of my relationship with my sister, though. When we grew up and moved out of mom's and dad's place, we would talk on the phone constantly. Outside of our parents' home, Lydia was able to grow and flourish. She went to college and met a boy. Eventually, they got married, and all of my sister's childhood anxieties seemed to melt away. That is, until Davy happened. Davy is my 5-year-old son. He is the reason I breathe. I never thought I would love motherhood so much, but from the moment I held that crying little bundle against my heart, the first time I knew I was done for. Lydia was there for every moment of Davy's life. She came to the hospital with me and offered to stay in our guest room for the first week of his life. She was the angel every new mom needs, but after a week she didn't seem to want to go home. I asked if she was getting tired of dirty diapers and she brushed it off. I did not think much of it at first, but then when she announced she would be extending her stay, I got a little nervous. 1 week later, I found her taking a selfie with Davy and captioning it, "My baby and me." I tried not to think too deeply about it. She must have meant to say nephew, but when I confronted her about it, she burst into tears. "I'm so sorry, sis," Lydia cried. "It's okay," I said, completely confused. "It's not," she wailed. "I just want a baby so badly." I snorted involuntarily. "Sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but you need a man first," I said. Ouch. No, I quickly corrected. I didn't mean to be rude, I just meant that I'm going to put on the sexiest dress that currently fits me, pump, and then we're going out to get you pregnant. Lydia laughed hard. This is what I loved about my sister. It was that even when her mood swings took over, I always knew how to make her laugh. I asked my hubby to watch the baby for an hour that night, and Lydia and I went out dancing. Some twist of fate must have wanted us there, because my sister ended up dancing with a very nice guy. Things were going so well that when I told her I needed to get home to Davy, she said she was gonna stay with her new friend. I smiled the whole cab ride home, dreaming that maybe I had just introduced my sister to her future husband. And 3 years later, my dream came true. Lydia married Mark from the club and they were so happy. I was even her maid of honor. At the end of an amazing wedding, I kissed my sister goodbye as she left for her honeymoon. "Next time you see me, I'll be pregnant," she yelled out the car window as they drove off. I laughed. 2 years passed, and much to Lydia's demise, she still had not gotten pregnant. And they were not just trying the traditional way. Lydia was undergoing fertility treatments, holistic therapies, and listening to every crazy old wife's tale that ended with a baby. It was taking a toll on her. I knew it couldn't be easy, and my heart went out to her, but around Davy's 4th birthday, she started to get really strange. She would call me crying, asking how the baby was, and once she even FaceTimed me while drunk. She said she would end her own life if she did not get pregnant soon enough. I kept her on the line though through the entire hour-long drive to her house and then sat with her all night while she lamented her experience with infertility. I did not mind taking care of her. Lydia is my sister and I love her, so I would move mountains for her, but when I left the next morning she said something really weird. "This would be so much easier if you just shared Davy," she said. I laughed, but the look on Lydia's face was no joke. Her expression was full of dark yearning, as if she was not kidding at all. She wanted my son. I gave her a hug and told her a baby would happen soon, and then I left. The following Christmas, the whole family got together at my parents' house. Davy was 5, so watching him enjoying the holiday traditions warmed everyone's hearts except Lydia's. She was weepy all day long. Just the sight of Davy would make her cry. Eventually, I had enough, so I pulled her aside in our childhood bedroom to talk it out. "What's going on?" I asked. "The treatments make me emotional," she said. "But are they working?" I asked. "No, they make me fat, irritable and sore, but I'm not pregnant," she said. "Ah, sis, I'm so sorry." "That is so hard to go through," I said. "Yeah, it is." She paused and grabbed my hand. "That's why I don't want to do it anymore." "Lydia, that's such a hard choice to make, but I will support you no matter what." My sister's face broke into a great smile. "I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I have a great idea." I anticipated her idea, so I said, "I cannot be a surrogate mom. I have high blood pressure." "That's fine. I don't want a surrogate. In fact, you don't have to do anything. I just want Davy." I must have misheard her. "What?" I asked. "Davy. He loves me so much and he gets along with Mark, so I thought maybe you could just share him," she said. I was shaking. Lydia had a history of somewhat wild ideas, but this one took the cake. Just then there was a knock on the bedroom door. It was our parents. "What are you two hiding up here? It's almost time for gifts," our mom said. "We'll be right there, Mom," Lydia said. "We're just having a talk." "Oh," Mom said knowingly. "Oh?" I questioned. "Did you two know that she was gonna ask me this?" "Sweetheart, relax. Of course we knew and we couldn't agree more with Lydia. She has been through so much," Mom said. I laughed in spite of myself. This was just like growing up all over again. I was the stable one, so they expected more of me, but this was not some sweater we were fighting over. It was my son. A living, breathing little boy that they were conspiring to take from me. "This is insane," I said to no one in particular, and then I turned to my sister and looked her firmly in the eye. "Lydia, I love you more than I can say, but I love Davy even more, and he is my son. I know fertility treatments are impossible, but there are other options that don't involve taking my son." "He loves me," Lydia cried. "Yes, as an aunt. Did one of you consider how confused this would even make him? Or how he would feel about this, or how I would feel?" I was angry now and I felt the heat rising up my neck. "Calm down," Dad chimed in. "Hush, Dad, you all ambushed me on a holiday to take my kid. That is not just low, it's clinically insane. My family is leaving now," I said. Lydia looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Lydia, but you know this is crazy." I squeezed her hand. "You will have a child one day if it's meant to be, but it will not be my son," I said, and then I went to find my family and leave. For the entire next month I was bombarded with messages and calls from my parents and sister. Every message was the same. They always said that they were sorry, but they wouldn't let the idea of Lydia adopting Davy go. Most of the time I let the calls go to voicemail and left the message on read, but one day I was at my limit when my mother's name appeared on my caller ID. I picked up the phone and listened to my mother going on about how I was costing her oldest daughter the joy of motherhood. "It's always like this with you," I said. "You and Dad only see Lydia even though I'm the reliable, stable and supportive one. I've been there for Lydia and you guys through everything, and this is the thanks that I get. Maybe if you took better care of your son, then Lydia would not need to give him a better home," Mom said. I felt like I was punched in the stomach. "Wow, Mom, that's low, even for you. I love and care for my son and you know it. That was very hurtful, and before I say something equally hurtful, I'm just hanging up. Goodbye." That night, feeling the full weight of my family's baggage, I cried myself to sleep. The next morning I woke up determined to be positive. I was humming as I packed Davy's lunch for kindergarten when the doorbell rang. I went to the door to find a nervous-looking woman in a brown suit accompanied by a police officer. "Hello," I said. "How can I help you?" "Are you Carrie Lee?" the officer asked. "Yes, I am. May we come in?" the nervous woman asked, and I stepped aside as a gesture to come inside. "This is a lovely home," the nervous woman said. "Thank you, but what's going on here?" I asked. "Ma'am," the officer said, "we are here as representatives of Child Protective Services. We received a report of neglect and abuse in connection to this household." My blood turned to ice water. I felt faint. "A complaint? Of what? From who?" I stammered. The woman in the suit cut in. "Do you have somewhere we could sit to discuss this?" I pointed to the breakfast table where Davy was eating. "This must be Davy," the officer said. "Would you like a real junior police badge, Davy?" He nodded excitedly. "Why don't you show me your toys and I'll give you a police badge?" she said, and then Davy grabbed her by the hand and led her to his room. "Cute," said the woman in the suit. "He is. I'm just so confused. We're good parents. I mean, look around. I was right in the middle of making lunch and helping him get ready. Would a neglectful parent do that? I understand your concern, but we need to take all claims of child neglect seriously. Would you consent to answering some questions?" I agreed, and then the woman unleashed a barrage of questions about our lifestyle, Davy's health, the school, the neighborhood, and our friends. It felt like it would never end. We toured the house and the CPS representative opened every cabinet. It felt completely invasive. The ironic thing was, while they conducted the interview, I had to call Davy into school. Finally, the pair seemed satisfied with what they found, but I had my own questions before they left. Who would do this? I asked. Report you mean? Yes. The CPS worker thought for a moment. We don't technically have to disclose that, but in this case, the report came from your family. We received calls from your mother and your sister. I cannot believe this, I said, and then I briefly explained what my family wanted from me. Both of the CPS people seemed disgusted that my family filed a false report on me. Look, the officer said, it's not my business, but if I were in your shoes, I would get some space. Maybe consider cutting them off before you find yourself in even more drama. I nodded. The officer was right and I could feel it in my heart. I did not want to cut off my family, but after this incident, I did not see another way. I wrote letters to my sister and my parents, and I explained how much they had hurt me and how embarrassing it was to have CPS intrude on my life. I told them how much the weight of their expectations had cost me, and finally, I wished them well in their lives without me or my family. I mailed the letters that afternoon, and I left lighter than I had in months. It was my job to protect Davy, even if it was from my own messed up family, and I finally felt like I had done it. Over the next year, there was little to no contact between myself, Davy, and the extended family. I saw updates online about what was going on with Lydia. That is how I knew she was pregnant. I was happy to know that she would finally have the child she was so desperate for, but there was still a hole in my heart. That is why, when she called a year later, I picked up. We talked over the phone for an hour. She told me she was in therapy now and that she had even brought the parents to a few sessions for family therapy. She told me about her beautiful baby girl Leia and how having her had given her a new perspective. I realized how wrong I was. I was just so desperate to be a mom that I lost sight of what it means to be a family. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry too, I said. I never wanted to cut you off, but we both needed our space. If you can trust me again, I would love to introduce you to Leia, she said. I would love that, I agreed. That was about a month ago, and it hasn't all been easy. Seeing Lydia and my parents again was emotional, but the gift of watching my son interact with his cousin gives me hope. From now on, my sister and I will face motherhood together, no matter what. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. My family and I moved into a new house a handful of years ago after I got a new job in a neighboring state, which meant that we had to move away from where we had been living. None of us were particularly excited about the change in location, but I was hopeful that we would settle in and find our new home here. The house was perfect for us as my family is me, my wife, Sandra, and our daughter Becca. We were a little worried about moving as we are black and we know that not every neighborhood is friendly towards people of color, but on the day we moved in, we saw that the family next door were also people of color. We talked to them a bit and learned that they were Chinese, which eased some of our nerves about living in the area. The mother of the family, Karen, was a little cold towards us, but that was understandable since she was just getting to know us. They had a daughter as well, and it seemed like she got along fairly well with Becca, which made me happy. Over the years that we lived there, we got visited by the police more often than anyone really should, especially since we didn't ever do anything wrong. Every single time they showed up, it was because they had gotten an anonymous report that we were up to something. We had just gotten back from the grocery store one day when the police knocked on the door hoping to talk to us. I asked them what was wrong and they said that someone saw us bringing suspicious things into our house. Even they seemed a little bit annoyed by the whole situation, as they had relaxed considerably the moment I opened the door. I explained to them that we had just brought in groceries and I didn't know why someone would think that we were doing anything suspicious. There were other situations, all of them similar to the first one. It did not happen so often that the police stopped responding completely, but we got to know the officers pretty well. We started to keep a list of all the things we were reported for, ranging from noise violations on nights we were not even home to claims that we were dealing drugs out of our house. We were never charged with anything, of course, and there wasn't proof that we were doing anything wrong. I started noticing that Karen was home every time the police were called, which was not exactly strong evidence that she was behind it, but I was suspicious. My daughter typically keeps her hair in box braids, which are intricate and take a long time to do. Sometimes it takes multiple days to get every strand of hair into a braid. Becca has long hair that she is incredibly proud of, and I am amazed by the amount of care she puts into it. We were outside one morning getting ready to go to school when we saw Karen outside with her daughter. I waved at them and Karen stopped where she was and looked at her own daughter and then mine. Her child always sported a short haircut, which I thought framed her face perfectly, but I was getting the sense that Karen was jealous of Becca's beautiful long hair. I said good morning and Karen scowled, replying that my daughter should not have such a ghetto hairstyle, since it made the rest of the neighborhood supposedly look bad. I just frowned and rushed Becca into the car because I didn't feel like calling out her problematic comment. Karen was part of the local HOA, which is probably why she commented on making the rest of us look bad. The other HOA members were not racist as she was, at least not openly racist. Not long after that incident outside, we got another visit from the police. This time they were investigating a report of child abuse and neglect, which was shocking to me. They wanted to talk to Becca, so I called her over to the front door and left them alone since they wanted to talk with her privately. They left 50 minutes later and Becca told me that their report had been about her hair specifically, and there was concern that we were letting it get unhygienic and inappropriate. It only took one look and a short conversation for the cops to see that it was unwarranted, and I couldn't help but feel it was a little too coincidental that Karen had taken an issue with Becca's hair only a few days earlier. We never confronted Karen about it because we knew she would blow it out of proportion and potentially cause problems for us since she was an HOA member. The whole thing was annoying, but it didn't seem worth it to jeopardize the life we had built here and potentially create a scenario where we would be forced to move out or something. We did our best to ignore her and all the microaggressions we were faced with. A month ago, Becca had gotten these beautiful red hair extensions and incorporated them into her box braids to create a multicolored statement piece that she was proud of. A big dance was coming up at school, and this was going to pull her entire outfit together. She was practically giddy with excitement about the whole thing. We have a bench in our front yard along with some other furniture for the times we want to sit outside on a sunny day or admire the moon at night. So Becca was out there with some of her friends and they were busy discussing the dresses they would be wearing to the dance and ideas for their hair and makeup. Karen came by at some point and waved hello to the girls as she stepped up to the porch. She pretended to ring the doorbell but didn't actually press it. We have one of those video doorbells, but I was not paying much attention to it since the girls would set it off every time they got up or moved around too much, so I assumed the newest notification was just them. The video recorded everything and I was able to watch it back and see Karen turn around slowly with a sharp pair of scissors clutched in her hands behind her back. She started walking down the porch and approached Becca with the scissors in one hand. My daughter turned around and started to ask what she was doing when Karen slapped her across the face, quickly grabbing the ends of her hair and bringing the scissors up. The girls all started yelling and many of them pulled out their phones to record what was going on as they shouted at Karen to get away from them. I was inside at the time and heard them the moment they began shouting. I rushed outside to see my daughter with tears in her eyes and Karen holding a clump of Becca's braids in one hand and scissors in the other. It did not take long for me to put everything together and I was honestly worried that she would attack one of the other girls. I definitely did not trust her to be near my daughter with a sharp object, so I punched her in the face. I don't typically resort to violence, but I was genuinely worried about the well-being of my daughter and her friends, so I didn't stop to think it all through. I called 911 and officers showed up quickly to the scene where Karen was coming to and complaining about how much her face hurt, but she felt good enough to begin calling us criminals. Her friends were all standing up for her, but the officers were focused on what Becca was saying. She did a great job of explaining what happened and the evidence was clear as her braids were now on the ground and Karen still held the scissors in one hand. The officers who showed up were some of the same ones who had come to the house after Karen made false police reports previously about us, so they had good reason to believe that we were telling the truth. Not to mention, everything was caught on camera because of my video doorbell, so the entire situation could be viewed by the police. They asked Becca if she wanted to press charges since cutting someone's hair without permission is considered battery. Becca of course decided to press charges, and I stood behind her on that, so Karen was taken into custody and is now serving jail time. We found someone who fit my daughter with a beautiful wig, and while it wasn't the same as her perfect braids, it was enough to make the school dance memorable. Karen's daughter came over to apologize even though she did not do anything wrong, and I am hopeful that they might become close friends over time. And yeah guys, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on all major podcast platforms such as Spotify, Apple or Google Podcasts. Furthermore, you can find bonus content by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or by clicking the join button here on YouTube. For a small monthly fee, you will get access to dozens and dozens of exclusive videos you won't find anywhere else. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.